Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's Rewilding Network webinar. For anyone who doesn't know, my name is Sarah King. I'm Rewilding Manager at Rewilding Britain, and we have a rewilding network of landowners and land managers, as well as communities who manage land for rewilding. And the network is aimed to try and provide practical advice and help support knowledge exchange. So these webinars are a great way to share what other people are doing and an opportunity for you to ask questions and explore a little bit more. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Fiona and Rich, who have an organisation called Found Outdoors, and they have a site in Wiltshire, and they're going to tell you a little bit about their journey from purchasing the site through to what they're doing on the land now. Just a bit of housekeeping. If during the presentations you can keep your videos switched off, that will just help with bandwidth, and if you can stay on mute. And then because we've set this up as a normal Zoom call, when we get to the end, you can raise your hand using the actions at the bottom, the reactions button, to ask your question. Or if you prefer, you can put your question in the chat and I'll pick up those questions and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. But without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Fiona and Rich, who are going to start their presentation.
Hi everybody, I'm just going to share the screen. Okay. So hopefully that's working for everybody. Thank you, Sarah. As Sarah said, we are Fiona and Richard Cassidy. We're running an organisation called Found Outdoors, which is a community interest company on a piece of land in the middle of Wiltshire. We started this enterprise about 3 years ago now with the idea that we wanted to connect people with nature. We've got a map of our site here. We'll talk through a bit more about what the land is like, but basically we've got 54 acres, which comprises 2 woodlands and 2 fields. And we're working on that site with lots of different people, some really experienced practitioners to get people outdoors and do all sorts of things with them out in the natural world. We've spent, Rich and I have been working together on this for a long time now, and we've had an interesting day over the last few days trying to put this presentation together. We've got quite different working styles, so we've our solution to that has been that Richard's going to do most of the talking. I'm going to press the buttons and keep the timing going, and he'll poke me if he needs any questions from me, and I'll poke him if he gets it wrong. So over to Rich, and hopefully you'll enjoy the next half an hour or so of our pictures.
Brilliant. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for turning up. It's always a bit nerve-wracking when you do something like this and you think you might get 3 people and you know them all. That'll be it. So yeah, thank you for turning up, and thanks, Sarah, for the introduction and for organising all of this. So yeah, we're just going to talk a bit basically about our story, what motivates us, why we did this, how we bought the land, and where our journey to where we've got to 3 years later. So to start off with, we'll tell you a bit more about us, really. So there's me on the left-hand side, not in the charming swimming costume. We both had fairly rural upbringings. We grew up in the countryside in the 70s. I particularly grew up in quite a farming area. We're not ecologists or anything. We've never owned land before, but we just grown up in rural villages. And so, our childhoods involved playing outside a lot, being in the woods and just generally getting muddy. And as we've got older, we've had comfortable jobs. We've watched our own children growing up. And a lot of this has been under the growing spectre of climate change and the bad things that are happening to the planet, really. And we've become increasingly uncomfortable with just sitting behind a desk, doing a nice job, earning a nice amount of money. And we've just been feeling that for longer and longer that we had to do something to make a change. And, you can go on marches and you can stand up and be counted, which is great. But about 12 years ago, my mother died. We inherited her fairly modest house, and that gave us a bit of money, which allowed us some freedom to think maybe a little bit more outside the box about how we could actually make a positive change to the world that we're living in. And so I was, at this point, it was just me coming up with the ideas and thinking, I'll do something crazy, and Fiona has a sensible job and actually, keeps us afloat. And for about 10 years or so, I was casually looking for land and thinking, you know, maybe one of the things to do is to start up a forest school and to buy sort of 5, 10 acres. I mean, much like the size of land that our children were using at primary school. You know, it kind of didn't really go anywhere, because it turns out that land is actually a lot harder to buy than you might think, especially if you've got some very specific requirements in mind, like really good access so that you can actually run a business from it and get people to it. And, you know, a decent mix of trees as well. There's a lot of small plantations available with fir trees and stuff like that, but that's not much fun to run a forest school on, with no understory, you know, very dark, and just not an appropriate environment, basically. So there came to a point when, you know, this really wasn't progressing, and I was having more and more conversations with Fiona and so on. And, you know, we had the money from my mother's house. And so back in 2019, about 5 months before the pandemic started, Fiona quit her job and came on board and said, right, we'll give it a year. If we can't find a piece of land within a year, we'll plan B or something. You know, how hard can it be? So we then started looking, basically all day, every day, was trying to find an appropriate piece of land, come up with a plan of what we were going to do and so on. And eventually this culminated with a really good piece of land coming up on Rightmove of all places. We've been in woodlands.co.uk that some of you may be familiar with, and we joined a small woodland owners group, SWOG, on Facebook, and we talked to lots of people. We've got friends that have owned land, a friend that's a farmer, and we'd spoken to him and said, yeah, how do you buy land? You know, what do you do? Can you just write to someone? I've no idea. Well, the biggest piece of land I've ever owned is a back garden. You know, this is very alien stuff to us. And this piece of land came up on Rightmove that was amazing. As I mentioned just now, we're looking for about 10 acres, and you might be able to see on the right-hand side of your screen, it's a little bit bigger than 10 acres. In total, it was 54 acres. But the other thing that we found out was, you know, although obviously the price goes up, the price per acre comes down quite dramatically the more land you buy. And this fell within the budget that we had. So we basically said, well, you know, we kind of need to do something. We're stuck. We want to make a positive impact on the world. What's the worst that can happen? How hard can it be? You know, with no experience at all. So we put an offer in on the day, viewed it on the day it came onto market, put an offer in the next day, and kind of expected to have a bit of fight on our hands and didn't think it would really come off. And got a phone call back pretty much within, 24 hours, saying your offer's been accepted. Give us your solicitor's details. So, you know, that was it, basically. And suddenly we were really at the sharp end of actually purchasing a piece of land. It's not even close to our house. This is a good half hour's drive away. There's no buildings on it. There's no way we can live on it or anything. So, you know, we had to get to grips with what it's actually like to own this, and what do you do when you've got a plan. But a plan is great in theory on a piece of paper when you're sitting at home on your sofa, but actually, you know, the reality is, it certainly focuses the mind, that's for sure. So the first thing we did really was just get to know the land and get used to the size of it and the scale of it and what we've actually got. Because, you know, like I said, we bought this on the first viewing, or actually I think it was technically the second viewing. So we'd spent about half an hour on the piece of land. We knew it was amazing. That's kind of all we knew. We just said, we love it, it's incredible. So we spent a long time, most of our first year, and actually probably we're still doing it to this day, but just walking the land, getting to know it, trying to understand, you know, what we could realistically do with it. And, you know, while we were trying to level up a little bit, one of the first things we did was to find all the internal fences and the farming agricultural detritus stuff that was left there. And we could clear that off, because you don't need a degree in ecology to do that or any particular experience. So we cleared, I don't know, 3-4 kilometers of barbed wire, and just kind of got on with things like that. And it soon became quite apparent that actually we really did need to get some expert help on board. Apart from anything, we picked up the land subsidies from the Rural Payments Agency, which come with agricultural land. We've got no idea how they work. You know, we're not stupid, but they're incredibly complicated. So one of the first things we needed to do was to get somebody on board who could actually help us with that, a land agent. And we were put in touch with a guy called Leo Dawson, who was absolutely fantastic. He did this kind of work already. He knew it inside out and backwards. He worked on big estates and so on. And as a bonus, he also was qualified to write woodland management plans and had a huge amount of forestry experience. So, you know, he was just an amazing help to get on board, you know, pretty close to the beginning of our project. And in addition to him, one of the other things we realized that we needed to do was to get somebody who was an expert in ecology to come in and tell us what we've really got. You know, I think we could probably successfully identify half a dozen tree species.
Probably, yeah.
You know, and if it wasn't one of those, we'd just call it an oak, and so on. So obviously we needed a bit of help, and one of the most useful groups that we've come across is the Small Woodland Owners Group. So we posted on there and said, look, we've bought this land. We need an ecologist. We need to get phase 1 ecology report done. And I think about 15 people replied, and they all gave us the same name of this one person who is here tonight, I believe. So this is Pete Etheridge, who runs his own business doing ecology reports. He's also expert in forestry and charcoal and coppicing and so on. And he came along, we had a good meeting with him, and he produced our first ecology report for us, and was just, you know, like Leo, really clicked with us. And you know, this is one of the most important things. You know, we've met a lot of people in the last 3 years, and you really want to be working with people that get what you're doing. It's so important that, you know, we're not working with a forestry person who's always looking at the pound signs. We need to make money out of this project, but we need people who are really sensitive to the site, because at the end of the day, although at this point we're not running a rewilding project, that's what we end up doing, and we need to look after the site. And so we finally met these first 2 fantastic people, and then simultaneously we're making friends with our neighbours. So we've got the several houses that are joining the land. It's next to a village, and we're just reassuring people that we meet that we're not going to cut all the trees down and build some houses and make a quick buck. You know, that we're actually serious about this. We're going to, you know, look after the woods. We're going to keep it as an asset for the community, and you know, we're going to be doing educational stuff from it, which is our original plan. And so one of the first things that we do after that is put some signs up at the front gate with our logo and our nice colours on it and everything, just so that people can see that we've got, you know, there's a business running from here. And this turns out, unknown to us, that this is a genius move. So if there's anyone in the audience who's thinking of or just bought some land, put some signs up, because as soon as we put signs up, people walking past and driving past saw them, and they started to contact us, and they were really interested. They said, I saw your sign, quite interested. I've known these woods for ages. What are you doing there? And we've met pretty much nearly everyone else that we know through having our signs outside, really, and certainly in the first year. So we met people doing working with children, doing psychotherapy stuff, doing well-being. We met our bushcraft guy, Kevin Whitehorn, who runs business from our site called Aim on the Plain, doing bushcraft and archery. And we've met Hannah, who was a primary school teacher who was interested in forest schools. She just started training as a forest school teacher and was looking to, once she completed her training, get out of the primary school environment and start up a forest school, which, to cut a long story short, she actually did. And she now runs Wild Hearts Forest School on our land. And then while we're meeting people and all these things are going on, we realise that what you can't do with a piece of agricultural land is run any other business from it. So you can't run an educational business from, you know, the woodland that you've just bought unless you get a change of use, and you can't get a change of use until you own the land. So it's you can't sort of prepare yourself for this and say, you know, well, I'll only pay for it if I can get change of use. So this opened up the wonders of the planning system to us. So we had to figure out how on earth you apply for a change of use and what change of use you actually need. There are a lot of categories that you can apply to change for, and it turns out that a bit of forestry work and a bit of education work and a bit of working with fine artists, because Fiona's got an arts background, it doesn't really come under one category. And incredibly serendipitously, one of the people that saw our signing came past and asked us what we're doing, was an architect from the local village who was really interested in our project, liked what we did, and said, well, look, if you need some help getting the change of use, this is bread and butter work for me. Talk to me about it and I'll get it done for you. We'll get it sorted. So we had a few meetings with Johnny. He's Chalk Architects. I give him a good plug because he's Johnny Marion, Chalk Architects. He's a fantastic guy. He's been super supportive of us. And at the same time, when we were applying for change of use, we also needed to get some infrastructure, which is a very grand term. We're talking compost loo and a couple of barns. And so Johnny was also able to really help us with that and to draw up the plans. And we designed stuff ourselves and then gave it to Johnny so he could actually draw up some proper plans that are, you know, that you can really submit to grown-ups rather than the sort of stuff that we're producing. And he got all of that put through for us. And I think we'd kind of realised this was a big deal, but I don't think we'd realised quite how important and how difficult it could potentially be. There's a thing called permitted development, which I'm sure many of you may have come across. So if you're running a farm and you're looking after animals and doing agricultural work, you can legally build barns and whatever you need to run your business from. But that all gets a bit murky if you're not running a proper agricultural business, you know. So we had to go through the full planning process for our barns and our compost loo. So we've got permission for a barn and a compost loo at the top end of the site and the same at the bottom end of the site. And also we needed a car park as well. So we got planning in for all of these things at the same time, which was just incredibly useful.
That came through in January 21, so not far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're
6 months in, not even 6 months into the project.
And we're happily doing this through the pandemic. It's hard to meet people. You have to do a lot of stuff with phone calls and bumping elbows and wearing masks and everything. So we actually met the farmer that we bought the land from once, even though he lives next. He's now our neighbour. We've only officially met him the one time when we actually came to look at the land. So once we got our planning permission set up and we were ready to go, we fantastically lucky with our forest school teacher. So we were really starting to realise that the stuff that we planned was moving ahead quite nicely. But we'd obviously bought a lot more land than we'd anticipated. And it really became very apparent that a lot of what we were doing was going to require us properly managing the land. We haven't bought 5 acres of woodland that we can kind of garden. We've got 2 21-acre woodlands and 2 6-acre fields. And we hadn't ever thought about owning a field in our lives. So, and the fields themselves have been, they've been topped. So they're just grass fields. They look like long lawns. And, you know, as with many other things that we found, you know, we have no experience of woodland management. So, and we need to get on top of that. We need to understand how we can actually find out what we've got living on the site. And, you know, the best ways of going about this, because if we're going to start to manage the land properly and in an ethical way and, you know, look after the ecology of the land and create habitats, then we definitely need to up our game. And we need to talk to more experts about this kind of stuff and get a much better understanding. So again, our signs come into fantastic use, and 2 local people in the village contacted us and said, look, we're kind of amateur biologists, I think they are, is that right?
Moth enthusiasts.
Well, they're moth enthusiasts as well as many other things. And they said, look, we've got a moth trap. Could we come and set the moth trap up and count the moths and see what species you've got. And so neither of us, we were basically still thinking about big animals and getting excited about the deer that we'd seen and the badgers and things like that. And we were like, yeah, sure, if you want to do moths, that's great. Not that exciting for us, but it's quite exciting to see how you do it. The mechanics of it is really interesting. And so they came along and they set up this piece of equipment on the left-hand side here. And for those of you that haven't seen a moth trap before, it's basically a box with a fluorescent tube in it, ultraviolet light, I think. You fill it with old egg boxes, and you put a lid on the top with a small entry, so the moths can get in attracted by the light, but they can't get back out again very easily. So what tends to happen is they come in and they kind of roost in amongst the egg boxes, and then you come back pretty early in the morning, take the lid off, take the egg boxes out, get your moth identification books out, and see what you've got. And we basically let them get on with it. We didn't get involved at all. We just said, we agreed whether they could do it, and we just said, look, send us photographs and tell us what you find. Thinking, moths, not that exciting. They just kind of bat around and fly into lights and stuff like this, which is a shocking admission, but that's where we're at. And they came back to us with this incredible list and these incredible photographs. And I think the first trap they did, they got 77 moths, of which there were 39 species. And I had no idea how many species of moths there are at all. And it turns out, for other people in the audience who don't know, there are literally thousands of species of moths out there. And these are photographs of just two of them. And they've got some great photographs, and they're incredible. The color variants, the size variants, just magnificent creatures, absolutely magnificent. So when they said, can we do a second one? We were just absolutely, yes. Can we come along and see what happens when you take them out in the morning? So we, or actually I think it's just myself that went along, by my reckoning, ridiculously early. I think it was about 7:30 in the morning, which is crazy early. And there were 129 moths and 44 species this time, which was just completely mind-blowing as far as we were concerned, which got us really in thinking, okay, so we need to do some more baseline studies. We need to get a better understanding and some data, because if you're going to be making changes to the site, if you're going to be managing the land properly, you want to know what you're starting off with so that you can work out, what effect the changes are that you're making. And so we started putting trail cameras around, and we're getting some great footage of the roe deer, the muntjacs, foxes, badgers, maybe not such great footage of squirrels, because there's a lot of them. And once you've seen one squirrel, you've kind of seen them all. And then there's hares at the bottom of the land and so on. And then up in the top left there is a heron. And it turns out that at the bottom end of the land, the furthest point from our entranceway, we've got two large ponds which were dug out in the 1800s because of the clay in that part of the land for local brick making. They've increasingly become overgrown in the subsequent decades, and they're now home to 7 or 8 herons' nests. So we'd inherited a small heronry at the same time, which Fiona has been diligently counting and submitting records for over the last 3 years. And this is simple stuff that we could do, but we realised that actually there's a whole world out there that we really cannot, begin to do by ourselves. And this is one of the drone shots of our bottom field, which this is, what's this, about 2 years in? So this was originally, this was a topped field. It was, again, it looked like a lawn. The big paths that you can see running across the top side and right through the middle, those two, those are cut by us by hand. Every other path on there is an animal path that's been created by the badgers and the deer and so on. And standing at ground level, you've no idea. I mean, I'm sure that our ecologists in the room know all about this, but you can see some of the paths from the ground, but there's no idea that there's this huge network going on. And this is the same in both the fields. And the more overgrown they became, then the more exciting and obvious the paths became. And also, the more difficult it is to actually find anything amongst them. It turned, we went from being able to see the roe deer and the muntjac when we walked into the fields before they ran away to, they could be there and we just wouldn't even know they were there. So every now and then we come across a muntjac that would just leap out sort of 20 feet in front of us and bark at us and run off because, there's so much growth starting to happen in these 2 years. So we'd approached Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, which seemed to be the logical thing. They're the biggest wildlife organisation that were local to us, and we thought, well, this is great. But actually, initially, they're pretty busy. It turns out they've got a lot of land, and they don't have a lot of time to help out smaller projects like us when we're saying we don't know very much. Can you come and count some animals for us? But very fortuitously, we came across, and I can't actually remember how we found the Wiltshire Mammals Group.
Something to do with Facebook.
Something to do with Facebook. We found the Wiltshire Mammals Group and the Wiltshire Bat Group, who are headed up by an ecologist called Gareth Harris, who we spoke to, came for a visit on site and was unbelievably helpful. And he's got a wide-ranging knowledge of all the animals that live in the sort of environment, the habitats that we've got on site. He knows a huge amount about bats and about small mammals, and he's really experienced. He works within Wiltshire on large estates and farms. He's a farmer himself, and he was just super enthusiastic, just really encouraging of what we were doing. So through the Wiltshire Mammals Group, Gareth came and helped set up. The first thing he did was he arranged for a small group of volunteers to come, and we'd found it really hard to ask people for help because we were kind of thinking, we've got ourselves into this mess. We can't really expect people to give their time for nothing, even though we'd have people coming to us and say, can we help? What can we do? We want to come and do something for nothing. It's great. We love it. We still felt bad about that. And so Gareth organised a harvest mouse survey, which was our first proper survey that we'd ever done, outside of moths. And he organised for a small group of people to come along. And that was really our first taste of getting volunteers on the site. And, for just, going through the grass with your hands and finding out what you've got there and looking for harvest mouse nests. And again, a huge education for us, really fascinating. And this kind of went on, and Gareth said, well, look, I do bats as well. Bats is really what I'm at. I don't really know very much about anything else, which is a huge lie, by the way. He knows an awful lot about a lot of things. So he was able to bring along some bat detectors, which are all done sonically. So rather than camera traps where we're photographing things, you set up the bat detectors and they detect the noises that the bats make as they travel on whatever track or path that you put the detectors on. So Gareth set up he's done 2 bat surveys for us, one at the bottom of the site by the ponds, which is a great habitat for some species, and one on the main woodland track in the top woods. And they were fantastically successful. He produced a really, really interesting report for us. And I think in total we've got 11 species of bats out of, is it 13?
18 in this country.
18 in this country. So a really good species count for bats, including some pretty rare ones as well. Not huge numbers, but it's really encouraging. And, this stuff we can't do without somebody else showing us. And also the equipment's quite expensive. So again, this is a fantastic thing for us to be able to have somebody come and do this for free. Or as it turns out, we did a bit of an exchange later, a skills exchange from my background of graphic design, in exchange for Gareth and the 2 groups coming to help us out. And then the other thing that Gareth did with us was he set up a small mammals camera trap. If we could just go back one slide. And in the bottom corner, we had a lot of small voles and mice. But in the first one, we got a weasel, which was also, I think, the first time that Gareth had seen a weasel in a small mammal camera trap like this. So that was pretty exciting as well. And we've never seen one on the site in the flesh. But that was just a huge win and really exciting just to know what other things are living here. So he also introduced us to another one of the group's members. This is Abby on the left-hand side, Abby Gazzard. And she is an expert on hedgehogs. So we're able to use their hedgehog tunnels to do a couple of hedgehog surveys. So we had 20
tunnels.
20 tunnels
twice.
Yeah, across the whole site. And a hedgehog tunnel, for those who don't know, it's a
low-tech version.
This is one of the things we love about this is a lot of this stuff is incredibly low tech, and that is fantastic. So a hedgehog tunnel is a long triangular shaped piece of plastic, corrugated plastic. In the middle, you put some bait, and then either side of the bait, you put a piece of white paper and then a strip of tape with some ink on it. And the idea is that the creatures, the small mammals, hopefully hedgehogs, will walk in one side, walk across the ink, over the piece of paper, eat some food, and then do the same on their way out the other side. We spent a lot of time. Abby was amazing. She was incredibly patient and hardworking. And what was it, 20 traps? We got all our results back super excitedly. No hedgehogs, none at all, not a single hedgehog. Particularly disappointing because there are hedgehogs in the estate next to us, and there are hedgehogs in the village on the other side of us, but apparently none on our site. But at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter. It's still baseline data. So from doing this, if there are really no hedgehogs coming into the middle of our site, that's fine. That's the number of hedgehogs that we've got, and that's kind of the point of doing a lot of this stuff. It's not that we're thinking we're expecting high numbers and exotic species. You just need to know what you've got so that you can see what difference your changes are making. And so we, having done that, we'd also put some of these corrugated sheets down, which are great for invertebrates, for lizards and slow worms and snakes and so on. And although we have seen one slow worm, a single solitary slow worm, and a single solitary lizard, we've actually seen more lizards not on them than on them. It turns out they make fantastic homes for voles. So we've got a lot of voles, and nothing that it was intended for. So they do make, if you want to sort out alternative vole housing, then corrugated metal sheets are definitely a way to go. But I know that people have had a lot of success with them. So,
we'll keep trying.
We'll keep trying. Maybe we just don't get up early enough because, by the time they've recharged and heated themselves up, they go off for the day and do their stuff. So, maybe, you do have, it's quite time sensitive when you check these things to see what you've got under them. And there's plenty of other things we can do, by building bespoke habitats for snakes and so on. So having done all of this, we were also thinking, well, we need to look at a way that we can kind of ethically manage the land. We talked to a lot of forestry guys about how to enact our woodland management plan and use our felling license. And we also needed to extend our car park because the one we built was patently too small pretty much the day after it's finished, which you live and learn. You live and learn. And we thought we'd done all the measurements, and we'd been on the internet and got the size of the average car and looked at actual car parks and really thought we'd done our homework, and it was just absolutely hopeless. So we've got it. So this is where Pete, our lovely ecologist, came back in and flexed his forestry skills with us and taught me plenty about felling trees, because I'm pretty familiar with the chainsaw, but I've never done large scale felling before. And also we had to look at, we don't want to fell a lot of trees. We want to enact the woodland management plan to improve the woodland, but we're not looking at taking out a lot of trees for timber that can be sold and firewood and so on. We want to do it for the ecology of the site, to create better habitats and for the better health of the trees that are there, basically. So for us, bringing in tractors and forwarders, or even, dare I say, harvesters, which are these huge machines which come in with the jaws on the front and grab a tree, chainsaw it off, pick it up in the air like it's a flower and chop it up. These were, for what we're doing, they're not appropriate. They're appropriate for a lot of, bigger commercial projects, but certainly not for what we're doing. So one of the things we did was look into horse logging, and another fantastic expert that we came across was a chap called James Foster, who runs a horse logging business called Wessex Working Horses. So James came along, he's got loads of forestry experience as well, had a great meeting with him, and he was really enthusiastic, really encouraging with what we were doing, and was also really keen to put horse logging on the map and to try and encourage as many people to get involved with horse logging as possible, and to just, you know, really get people to see what it's about, to see what you can do that doesn't use heavy machinery. And so he was, you know, one of the things that we talked about him is he said, you know, it's fine, get some school kids, arrange, you know, open days, I'll come along, you can pay me for coming along, we'll get some trees cut in advance, we'll get them all cross cut into the correct lengths and all the rest of it, and he'll drag them out and show them how the horses work the land, and, you know, show them the harnessing and the various methods that you can pull logs out of a forest. And he was just fantastic. So we've done a day with him on a few trees that we had to fell in the top woods, where we had a path that had a couple of dangerous ash trees on it, and of course it's quite an overgrown wood, so you can't just fell a tree into a convenient space. So we had to take out a couple of sycamores, which themselves were a decent size, and just to be able to get the ash tree down. And so James came along, and we had a great day removing those, taking them up to our barn that we built by this stage, and so on. And so that was, you know, another fantastic opportunity to just work with someone who's an expert and who's doing things maybe a little bit differently, you know, rather than hiring in, you know, a big commercial outfit who've got heavy machinery. So while all this is going on, obviously we're not just sitting on our hands and doing the occasional day here of counting some animals and so on. We're trying to get events running. We've looked at our original plan and realised that a lot of what we planned for wasn't going to work. We thought there'd be, you know, we'd be able to rent space out to, you know, similarly minded, you know, ethical businesses, and they'd come along and they'd pay us some money for a day to hire the space and do what they do, and that we can make a modest living, or at least a modest income, if not a living, from doing stuff like that. And it was obvious that, you know, most of these small businesses, even forest schools, they just don't make enough money to pay us a living rent. So, you know, we had to relook at our plan, and we put on, over the first few years, we've done a number of events with different groups. So we had the forest school running, and that was lovely. We've got Kev doing his bushcraft parties and archery, and we've done a couple of wellbeing days with a local charity,
children's mental health
charity called Vibes and Minds, who also found us for our front signs. And so we've become more comfortable with putting events on, how they work, and also realizing that one of the other problems is, if we're managing the land as a rewilding project, we need to put the ecology and the habitats first. And what you can't do with that is put a large throughput of people, which is an obvious way of making money. So we needed to scale back the number of people that we thought we would put through the site, because it just isn't going to work. All you're going to do is end up with some trees and a very brown landscape with no understory. So we started working on the ideas of how we can make more money from larger organisations and smaller groups. So the first two that we've worked with are Bath University and their sister Bath Spa University. So Bath Spa University, Fiona has good connections with from her arts background. She did her MA and her postgrad work there, had a lot of good contacts with them. And also through the village fete in the local village, we met one of the lead lecturers at Bath University, who does a chemistry course for basically circular
Centre for Sustainable and Circular Design, I think it is.
Yeah, circular technology. And so we've had two separate events with the circular technology students. They were PhD students, and we did some workshops with them. And again, we brought Pete, the ecologist, back in for that. We also brought in an artist who is working with mycelium and doing sculpture and working on using fungus to make packaging and materials, and looking at, you know, the further uses beyond sculpture for mycelium. And that was fantastic. We did we also brought Hannah in, our forest school leader, who did some forest school work with them. And then we also did we did a day with, we've done a couple of days with students, MA students from Bath Spa University, and with them we took them around the site, we gave them a tour of the site, we talked about what the work that we're doing there. They dug clay with their hands from the ponds, and just generally had a day of doing stuff outdoors and connecting with the land. And this is one of the things that we keep coming back to. The people we bring into the site, the primary motive for us is to help people connect or reconnect with nature. Because if you've got a problem with climate change, and we've got a problem with a lack of access, public access to land, and so on, as particularly as it's highlighted in COVID, what did people do? People went out into the world. They wanted to go for walks. They wanted to be in open spaces and connect with nature. And, there's a lot of talk about, oh, people can't behave for leaving rubbish around and blah, blah, blah. And our feeling is a lot of that is because people just don't generally have access to this stuff. They don't do it, so they don't know how to behave. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. It's not for me to judge. But what we need to be doing is helping people connect with nature. And then if you connect with it and you love it, then you can start to care for it. And that's kind of fundamental to what we're doing in our project. Even though we didn't set out to be a rewilding project, it just became so much of an obvious thing to do with the land that we'd got. So year 3, which was in the winter of 2022.
So we're just coming to the end of year 3 now.
Yeah, so right now at the point of this webinar, we are literally on the cusp of the end of year 3. So here's some photographs. This is what we started off with on the left in 2020, neatly mown field. Local farmer had done a good job for us. He was very pleased with it, and it was very nicely cared for. 3 years later, on the right-hand side, it's starting to scrub up. We've got everything that was living in the ground is coming through. Lots of brackens, you might expect, dock, loads of wildflowers, really pretty mice ears, and just a lot of stuff which I can't identify. I've done it and then I forget it all. And lots of brambles coming through as well, and then lots of trees and the hedgerow shrubs and stuff are starting to really seed themselves over this period, because there's nothing cutting them down. The only problem they've got is the deer, which are a problem. There's no two ways about it, but they're not a huge problem.
Not for us on our side.
Not for us on our side. Yeah, the amount of land we've got, we can't keep the deer out. It'd be a crazy thing to do. And they live on Salisbury Plain. They live on the farmland. We're surrounded by stuff. There's not much we can do about it. And they, we want them to. Ideally, we'd like to have a better balance, but that's beyond the scope of this talk. So here's our bottom field. 2020, and 3 years later, the same thing. In the summer, the grass is over waist high. There's a lot of saplings in there now. Some of the saplings are waist high. We've got a lot of hawthorn and blackthorn. We've got trees, sycamores, oak, some really good oak saplings coming through, and it's starting to really scrub up quite beautifully, and we're really excited by this. And then, finally, to kind of round things off, the biggest project that we've had to date, and our biggest intervention with the land, is the 3 ponds that we've had dug this year. Again, this is at the furthest point away from the road. So these were created for us by Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, who did an amazing job and were fantastic to work with. They are part of a district level licensing scheme, which is run by the government through Natural England. When large contractors are doing work on sites where they disrupt the habitats of great crested newts, they pay into a central pot, which is distributed via the wildlife trusts to pay for new habitats to be constructed. So you can apply for this. They have a certain amount of money each year. I don't know how many wildlife trusts do it, quite a few of them, I think.
Most of them, I think.
They come and they look at your land, they do some soil samples, and if you're lucky enough to have clay, which we had, there, and they've got some budget left, then you can get some ponds dug. They arrange for the contractors to come in, who are really sensitive to the site. They're very ecologically aware, and they're not going to make a mess and churn everything up. And so this was a long time coming. I think we first contacted them in February this year. There were a lot of tests and waiting, and they're putting it out for tender and waiting for the right time of year. And back in end of August, I think it was.
I think it's less.
Less than that, maybe September. They brought a single excavator on site, and within a week they dug 3 ponds for us. 2 of them are 10 meters by 5 meters. The other one is 25 meters by 15. And they're specifically created for great crested newts, but they obviously create fantastic habitats for all sorts of additional creatures. And yes, it'd be lovely to have great crested newts on the site, but frankly, just having these new habitats that we don't have. Our other ponds that we've got are quite choked up with leaves. They're great for the ducks and the herons, but they're not great for general pond life and newts and the sort of things that you might normally expect. Again, these are only shallow, so they're about 1.5 meters deep at the deepest point, and they're seasonal, so they're not fed by any running water or anything, so they will rise and fall over the seasons with the rain. And this photograph is about 4 weeks after they're first done, so I haven't got a before shot here, but you can see
that field is down there.
Yeah, it's in the top of that picture on the right hand side. But you know, as you can see on the left hand side here with that picture, one of our first visitors to the ponds, you know, they were pretty raw when they were first done, and they're really starting to green up. And they also, the other thing they do is, or rather they don't do, is they don't seed them with any actual growing plants or anything. They put a few seeds on the bunds, which are the earth banks on the sides of the ponds, but that's it. A few seeds on the side, and other than that, they populate themselves. So all the creatures arrive by themselves, and whatever grows there is brought in there on the feet or the legs of whatever visits our ponds. And is in the soil. So this has been a really exciting way to finish off our 3rd year. And you know, to think in 12 months' time, these ponds will probably be pretty fully populated and really green. And Becky from the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, who oversaw the project, was amazing. I think it was her first full pond project that she'd actually done.
Yeah, I think so.
And she was amazing. They were so helpful, and fully funded courtesy of this district level licensing scheme. So that basically brings us up to speed. This is where we've got to in 3 years. There's some numbers on the screen for you. Purchase land in 2020. We've gone from 2 to 5 ponds. We've got 30 tree species and so on. So with that, I will hand you back to Sarah, and maybe there's some questions that we've got to answer.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm sure if we were in a real room at the moment, you'd have applause, but we're going to have to just imagine that virtually. But thank you so much for an amazing presentation. There was so much in there, and it's really inspirational to hear about the work that you've been doing. And yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. There are a couple of questions. There is a question from Megan, who is asking whether you needed to get planning permission for the ponds that you put in.
Yes, we do.
So Wiltshire Wildlife, that was one of the great things about the Wildlife Trust doing that for us, is that was part of what they did, is they applied to the council for planning permission. I think it's very unusual for them to say no, and particularly on our site, there's no kind of it's not going to cause anyone any problems. But yes, it is something that needs planning permission.
Great,
and I'll just add to that, you know, if you're interested in doing that and you want a bit more information, please feel free to contact us after the webinar. You know, we've got loads of information about this that's beyond the scope of this conversation.
Perfect. So next question is about your strategy for the land. So are you letting the land rewild itself in terms of field scrubbing up? Or do you have a plan for intervention or management of the land in any way? So are you doing any scrub or bramble control, or any other management going forward?
The short answer is yes, I think. This is one of the debates, I think, within rewilding, is how much or how little you intervene. In a way, with us, it started as a purely practical thing. We didn't have any means to mow that grass, and so we didn't, and we were waiting to see what happened. And I think at the moment, our plan is to let it go. And we've been so excited by seeing how many tree seedlings there are on the edge of the fields that it feels like that's better than planting saplings or managing that grassland for as like a meadow. So for now, yes, we're letting it go. I think everything has to be a for now, because the whole part of the project really is to do something and see what happens. And a lot of what we do is not doing anything, but we're intentionally not doing anything. And I think that, that happens with some of the trees. We've got trees that have fallen over and we've left them, and the point is to leave them, not to tidy them up. So yeah.
And linked.
And I'll just add to that.
Go for it.
So, sorry. Yeah. All I'd add to that is, I can't stress enough, we came into this not knowing anything. So we've had to look at other rewilding projects and see what other people are doing ourselves and take inspiration from them. And so I don't know where any of you people are, but if you're ever down in this direction, we visited John Thompson at Underhill, who's running an amazing project. He's about 5-6 years ahead of us.
Yeah. And
he's been doing all sorts of really interesting things with the fields that he's got there and his land. And so we went on a group visit to his project and we learned so much on there, and that's given us a lot of ideas for what we could do with our own land.
Great. And linked to your plan in terms of intervention, someone's asked whether you would consider or do you anticipate bringing any animals onto your land, so things like pigs and cattle.
Again, so far the answer is no. There's a practical element to that. Neither of us have ever, we're not farmers, as we said before, so there's a whole thing around looking after animals. There's no fencing really on the land, so if we did go down that route, there'd be a fencing question. And it's not a very practical site for getting animals in and out of it. And that's part of the reason the farmer didn't really want it anymore. He used to keep cattle on there, but it wasn't easy to get them on and off. It's quite wet in the winter. We did talk to a local sheep farmer who was interested, but again, the sheep aren't really the right thing from a rewilding point of view anyway. So, yeah, I think probably no. But again,
we're open.
know.
We're really open-minded about this stuff.
Yeah.
So, as we go through the project, it may be that we decide that bringing some pigs into the topwood, if there's somebody that can help manage them, is the right thing to do, and it would just be interesting to see what happens in that area. This is one of the pitfalls of having running small projects. You don't have any staff. It's the staff are here. This is it. And so we've got our hands quite full at the moment, basically. But animals is definitely a really interesting topic, and it's quite a hot topic in rewilding in general, certainly with the bigger projects.
Right. Catherine has a question about whether you make money on the project and how do you fund it?
Yes, thank you, Catherine.
Well, this is very funny, because when we visited Jonathan's project, that was one of the questions I had for him, because we were sitting there thinking we just make a loss all the time. Jonathan's years ahead of us. Surely he'll be able to tell us that it's all good. You don't have to live on beans for the rest of your life. But
so yeah, the short answer is we have some small income that from people renting the site from us at the moment. It's definitely not a living wage at the moment, and we are living on savings at the moment, so that has to change, and that's something that we've been really trying to work out as we've gone along. So having realised that we weren't going to be able to get small amounts from money from large amounts of people, current thinking is that what we will do is try and find a way to have to come for longer periods of time. So we are hoping to get another set of planning permission to build a small number of residency cabins on site, so that they can be places where artists can come in residence and potentially scientists as well. So some of those will be funded places, and then we will plan to rent out those places at a more commercial rent to cover that off, so that we'll get a balance. So that's looking like those financials stack up a bit better. There'll obviously be an investment to build them. We're hoping to build them mostly from timber that's already on the land. So we're still 3 years in, working on what the valuable resources we have are on site that we can use to create some income. There's a whole load of stuff we haven't talked about processing wood. We did buy a sawmill because we realised it was cheaper to process the trees that we'd already chopped down to make the car park into planks to make our barn than it was to buy that timber from a shop. So we now have a sawmill paid for itself. So there's a whole load of possibility about what that might generate in the future. So it's still a very open question about how we make money. Yes.
But we had always intended from the beginning that this has to be a business that stands up by itself.
Yeah.
You know, this is not a project that we can just fund indefinitely.
Yeah.
And hopefully, you know, that's one of the things we want to show other people, if it's successful, how you can do that yourselves as well. Because it's all very well saying, well, we've bought some land and we've got some savings, but, you know, we're quite privileged to be at that stage, let alone be at a stage where we could actually fund it indefinitely. And that's definitely not a thing.
Great. We've got a question from Pete. You'll be pleased to know it's not an ecology question. He's asking, what are your neighbours' views on your rewilding project? Are they supportive?
Yeah, I mean, we've been really delighted actually with how the neighbours how positive they've been. I mean, there may be some neighbours who hate us, but they haven't been in touch, so we're fine with that. Mostly, pretty much everybody we've met has been really pleased. I think Richard sort of touched on it, that a lot of people were really worried when somebody new bought the land that they might want to cut trees down, they might want to build houses. And actually our immediate neighbours on the other side of the road, because one of the things is we have good road access, have been amazing and actually really been practically helpful. Helen, our neighbour, helped us put the roof on our barn when I was ill with COVID. So, and they've been and helped us pull tree guards out and all sorts of things. So they've been great. The parish council have been really supportive. You know, we're doing things that are actually beneficial. Richard's trimmed the bridle way that meets our land, so we're doing some of the things that benefit us actually benefit the wider local community as well. So pretty much everyone we've met so far has been positive.
I think a lot of this is about having conversations with people. So the woods are in between a small housing estate and the village, and so although there's no bridleways on there, you do get the odd person walking their dog through, and you do get the kids walking to the primary school through there. And the previous landowner was intolerant of this, to not much effect. And we've decided to take a slightly different view and just to have conversations with people and say, you know, keep dog on a lead, stick to the path. And it's the same with the neighbours as well. It's really about talking to them and listening to what they've got to say. And if people have got, you know, everyone brings their own concerns along with them, you know, whether it's they think we're going to cut all the trees down or they think we're going to have parties or be noisy or whatever it is. You just have to listen to them and then to be really authentic in how you talk to them and just be open about what you're trying to do. And I think most people are pretty reasonable when it comes down to it. Generally, you know, we've only had a couple of people who've sounded a bit annoyed that we've met in the woods. And, you know, really, once we've explained to them what we're doing and why we're doing it, people are fine. It's usually they're a bit embarrassed because they've been caught trespassing where they shouldn't be. And so their reaction is to be a bit grumpy about it. And, you know, it could be the same with neighbours potentially. So, you know, obviously I know there's a lot of people do have a lot of problems with neighbours and with trespassers and so on, and it's not all rosy. It can be really difficult. But touch wood, so far, having some really good, thorough conversations with people and, you know, that's basically worked out. It's worked out. So we've been lucky, I think, maybe.
Fantastic. We're running out of time. I think we've still got time for a couple of questions. There's a couple that I'm going to group together about species, and are there any specific species you might like to see in the future? And are you thinking about any reintroductions?
I see someone said pine martens.
We'd love to have pine martens. Oh my goodness.
One of the issues for us really is our size, so we couldn't really actively introduce anything that we could then control. We haven't got any running water, so that's no good for beavers, unfortunately. So I think that's not going to be a thing. It would be great if creatures find us. Again, we're so at the beginning of learning even what lives there now, let alone knowing what had lived there in the past. So we met someone who grew up around the area, and he said he used to always see woodcock in the fields. Well, I don't think I'd recognise a woodcock if I saw one. So that's, I've got to learn what these things look like before we can know whether they're there. But I think, we've always got, probably most people on this call know all about NEP and the things that are arriving at NEP over time, and they're watching for those things. I think really all we have to do is just keep watching and see what arrives. So I think no to reintroductions. Was there another question bundled up in that? What was the other thing?
Are there any species that you'd like to see arrive? I guess pine martens you've already mentioned, but are there any
pine
others?
Martins would be lovely, because they might deal with the squirrels. I don't know.
And maybe more raptors and stuff like that. We've already got buzzards and kite nesting in the woods, which is pretty exciting. And we're right next to Salisbury Plain, so we do borrow a lot of the things that live on Salisbury Plain, and whether they decide to actually live with us or just come over and say hello, I don't know. But I can't think of any species that we could realistically introduce to the land that wouldn't find it too small for them, or try and escape across the main road onto Salisbury Plain, which is much bigger, and then consequently probably get run over in the process, which is a bit of a shame, but it's what it is. It's what it is.
Maybe some
I think for
glowworms.
me it's almost like volume. It's about seeing, always seeing butterflies when you walk down the field. We see them quite a lot now, but yeah, I think and always hearing birds, and always seeing birds often, and that sort of thing. I think being able to guarantee that when you take someone for a walk, they'll see something interesting. Deer are a pretty good bet, but yeah, I think that's the thing for me. It's about that abundance, and I think
it would certainly be good to actually see some snakes and some lizards.
Yeah, that would be good.
That'd be really exciting. They probably are almost certainly on the site, but the chances of us seeing them at the moment are tiny. So again, one of the things that we picked up from Jonathan Underhill was creating specific habitats for species like grass snakes, for example, so that they move in, and then you can just go and find them, and you can go and see them and show other people, because it's so much this is about showing people what you've got, not just telling people that we've got stuff. They need to be able to see it, whether that's in person or through photographs that we've got, and through webinars like this.
Perfect. I'm just going to ask one more question, because the time has flown this evening. If you were to give anyone else who's either looking to start trying to buy land for rewilding or have their own project and is wondering what to do, if you give them one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
Well,
other than do it, just do it.
Feel fear and do it anyway. That's that. I think.
And if you're thinking of running a business from it, stick a sign outside as soon as possible, even before you've got any infrastructure, because honestly, that was incredible.
Yeah,
we haven't had to network, and we were thinking, how do we do this? How do we get with the people that are interested in stuff like us? And it's happened really organically through word of mouth, and so much of it's from literally just putting 2 signs either side of our entranceway,
and some nice pictures of animals on our Instagram.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Trust yourself and do it.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much. If anyone on this call has some land in the Wiltshire area and they want to learn from others, we are going to be setting up a Wiltshire network to help with providing support and advice to each other. So look out for that. If you're not based in Wiltshire, if you're a bit further afield, have a look at the Rewilding Britain network map. There might be a county level network near you that, again, you can join up and find advice and support through that. And also, if you wanted to hear anything about any of the other projects, we do have a few webinars on the website as well, including one from Jonathan about Underhill. So check that out if you haven't watched that recording already. But just want to finish by saying thank you so much, Fiona and Rich, for sharing with us this evening. That was a fantastic, really informative webinar. We hope that the project continues to grow and thrive, and maybe we'll invite you again in a year or so to give us another update on how things are going. And it's really exciting to hear about the fantastic work you're doing. So thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who joined us this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.